Welcome students. In today's class we will start off by understanding local variables, class variables. So the objective of today's class is to understand the difference between class variables, local variables and global variables in Python. So let me just start off by defining a class. So I'm going to say class student marks. Now I'm going to define, say, two methods, and from these two methods we will understand the difference between these terminologies that I've mentioned. So I will just start off by saying student marks data. Then I'll say self. Now in self I want to give two variables, mark1 and mark2. Now what I wish to calculate is, so our objective is to first find the student's total in this particular method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say average is equal to mark1 added with mark2, and then I will print the average. I will say student average is equal to, place a concatenation and then convert it into a string, and then you print it. Define the object now. The object is student, and using the class we are creating the object. Now from this object I'm going to pass in the parameters student underscore mark underscore data. I'm going to call in this method using the object, and I'm going to send in these two parameters. This program looks great, and I will execute this to show you the output. So let me just run the program. I could have very well calculated the average there, but I want to reserve that for the subsequent method. Okay, there are a few things which we need to understand here. I have just directly brought in these variables and added them and then placed them into another variable and given the output. Now these two variables that you see here are, along with this variable, these three variables are called as the local variables. So mark1, mark2 and average, all these three variables are called as local variables. So let me write them down. So meaning they can only be utilized within this method. Now what if I were to use this in the subsequent method? I want to write the other method, student underscore average. I'm going to have a variable here. I'm going to say student underscore average is equal to, I'm going to utilize this variable which I have used, average divided by 2, and then I'm going to print this out. Print the student average is plus str of student average. Now student underscore average is the local variable associated with the method student underscore average, and we can very well use it. Now instead of average slash 2, if I were to say for example, if I were to say 75, let us just take 75. Let me take this off and place in 75. Now if I were to call this method using the object, it would perfectly work. it will perfectly work, because all I'm doing is I'm calling and printing it out. You can see it. You see that it will perfectly work. The reason it works, because this is a local variable. Now if I were to change this off back to what we have had earlier, that is average divided by 2, then we would have a problem. Why? Because this average is a local variable associated with this method, but I'm taking this local variable and I'm utilizing it in another method. Now let me run it and show to you how the output looks. You see that? There will be an exception. Student underscore average, and it says it's not defined. Simple as that. Why? Because we are using a local variable that belongs to some other method. So that is the distinction. So having mentioned that, the scope of the local variable is restricted within its method. Have that in mind. That is a very important association or definition you have to understand. Now, how am I to change this local variable into a class variable? How can I do that? Well, there is one particular way we can do that. I am adding mark 1 and mark 2. On the left, use the keyword self. The moment you use the keyword self, immediately you're declaring this average to be a class variable. Now what are you doing? Of course, you are adding mark 1 with mark 2. They are still local, but you're taking in their values and putting them into the class variable average. The moment you use self.average, you're changing the local variable average into a class variable. So have that in mind. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to bring in that variable self.average. Then I'm going to use it with this method here. I'm just placing the parenthesis for your understanding. Along with this, we have to do one more thing. We have to print here self.average, because if we have already changed the position of average, so we have to print self.average. We can't just have average there. So I'm running it. If I were to run it, there you go. So this is the student total and this is the average. So this is a beautiful program, how we can understand the distinction between local variable and class variable. Welcome students. In this class we are going to be learning about global variables. Now when we say global, it means the very word says it can be used all through the entire program. Now I'm going to give you a classic illustration of how exactly we can use this global variable. Now whenever you want to declare a global variable, the general preferred way is to declare it at the start. So I'm going to have x to be the global variable, and I'm going to give this value 1 2 3 4 5 star. Now I'm going to create a student's record and I'm going to set this value to be the PIN. So anybody who is supposed to be accessing the student record has to first enter this PIN, and only then the access would be given. So having mentioned that, let me assign the class student record, and then I will place in a colon. After that I will initiate the init method, and after initiating the init method I will give a print statement. Print, please enter the secret PIN to obtain access to student records database. So I have given that. Now I'm coming over and I would have to receive the input. So I'm going to give a variable called check. Check is equal to input. So I'm getting the input. Then I would have to run a if statement. So if x equals check, so if this is true, then you print this. You print access granted. So after you have been given the access, probably I will give some header, or I would say some pattern, some decorations. Probably this would make it up a little bit more appearable. Self dot roll number is equal to input, enter the roll number. So roll number is obtained here, and then self dot name, student underscore name is equal to input student name. So the person gets the access by means of a check. Now the question comes, what if the person fails the check? So else, if they fail, I need to exceed. So this function will only come in place only if I were to import, otherwise it wouldn't work. So this is very critical for the exit function or the exit method to work. In fact, this is a simple program where global variable is tested. Now the global variable is not part of this method, but yet we are using it to make this check. So have that in mind. Now the rest is straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the object student is equal to student record. So the object is created. The moment the object is created, this would get fired, and subsequently the program's execution can be seen. So let me run it. So it says please enter the secret pin to obtain access to student records. So the pin, I have the pin as asterisk. It is asterisk. Okay, even before I could enter, everything got finished. Now I want to add one more thing. See, in exceed, before I could exceed, I want to make this print. I want to say print access denied, so that we will know why the access is denied. So I'm executing it. So it is asking me to give the input. So I'm starting star 1 2 3 4 5 and star. Access granted. Enter the roll number 1201. Roll number is entered. Enter the student name Jack, and you click. The process is finished. So what I can do is I can little bit modify it. I can just say student record entered. So the idea here is the access is only granted based on this variable or based on this particular pin, and that pin is held by the global variable X. So that is the exact point I wish to bring it to your notice. Now you might ask me, how are we to know that this is a global variable? Okay, now in the previous class I have already defined to you a class variable and a local variable, and how exactly local variable cannot be accessed outside the method. I'm going to define to you another method, and I'm going to show to you how exactly from that method I can still call this particular global variable. So let me just do that. Now on the contrary, if the pin is incorrect, it's going to shut us off. I can also show you that. I will run the execution, and then I can show you if I were to enter a wrong pin. Say I'm entering 1 2 3 4 5, say 8 9 or 6 7, something like that. Immediately it says access denied. So our application is working well. Now to show you that this is indeed a global variable, what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy everything and I'm going to paste it. The only thing is that I'm not going to have an init method. I'm going to change this method to courses. That means I will have to call this method courses, and please enter the secret pin to obtain access to student courses, or I can say to courses database. Now this particular variable is actually a local variable present in this method, so you can either have it as it is or you can change it. That's not going to affect us. But what is going to be the much point of discussion is this X. If X is equal to this check, then you give the access, and then probably you can, after this, we don't need this, we are actually printing the courses, so you can say print these are the following courses. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Offered. And then you can say print an asterisk, make it big colorful, and then say 50, and then you can give the courses. Print first course, maybe software development. I will just copy this, and then second course Python, and so on and so forth. So after this, probably you can give underlining. Now if in case they enter a wrong pin, then access is denied, and then you exit. Now we need to call this method by the object. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to come over here, and the method is here. It has to be called by the object student dot. Okay, so student dot course would trigger this method. Now everything remains same. The only point is, the exact important point that we need to focus here is that this variable is now being accessed by other method, some other method. So now I'm going to run it, so you will clearly see. Please enter the secret pin. I'm entering the secret pin 1 2 3 4 5, and then asterisk, and access granted. Enter the roll number 1201, and Jack, please enter the secret pin to obtain access to the course. I'm entering the same pin 1 2 3 4 5 and star. So this is entered. Access granted. These are the following courses offered: software development, Python, and so on. Now, so you can clearly see how exactly this particular variable can be accessed all through the program by all of the methods. Now in a school environment, you have to take this into consideration, that they would not share the password to everybody, but of course there will be one password or one pin that would be given to all the teachers, and based on their requirement they can either change it or have the same pin, depends upon what they want. This is where global variable comes into play. Whenever you have an environment, an application, and you wanted everybody to access certain part of the information, then you can declare the variable to be as global. Now having mentioned this, 90% of the time in development people avoid using global variables. Well, having mentioned that, that completes our study on types of variables. So we are clearly looked into local variables, class variables, and global variables.